Welcome back to the King Films 2022 College Basketball Bracketology video, and we will be going over all 68 teams in the tournament today. And let's get right started with our Midwest bracket, and we've got Purdue at the number 1 overall seed after a couple of massive upsets last night. Auburn falls to Arkansas, and Purdue takes the 1 seed. After their massive win against Illinois, they would play Yale or Colgate in that game. Then we've got at the 8th seed, we've got Loyola Chicago, who continues winning in their conference. And then number 9, Indiana might even be the worst 9 seed and possibly a 10. They've lost 2 straight to Illinois and then a bad one at Northwestern. Those road games are always hard, but they'll have 3 bounce back opportunities in a row. This is a really tough schedule. If they cannot take advantage, then they could go down further, but they got at Michigan State, against Wisconsin, all ranked, and then at number 16 Ohio State as well. Speaking of Ohio State, they are a 5 seed here, and they would play Wagner in the first round. They are coming off a win at Maryland and have this game at Rutgers, but they did lose very close at Purdue, so that did not help their stock there. They have a few more opportunities down the road, including a date against Michigan State and then at Illinois as well. Number 4 seed Providence continues taking care of business in the Big East. And then number 3, Villanova would play Liberty. Villanova has been bouncing back as well. Number 6 seed, we've got Alabama, who's been up and down recently. Number 11, we've got Davidson, number 11 seed. This is not even an automatic qualifier for Davidson, although they do, I believe, lead the A-10 conference. But Davidson has been very solid as of late. And then a team that is surging right now out of the Mountain West is Wyoming at the 7 seed. Number 10 seed would be Oklahoma here. And then at the 2 seed, we've got Houston, who has 2 dates with SMU towards the end of the season. And those are probably their last opportunities until that American Conference tournament for them to get some more quality wins on their resume. I have them at the worst 2 seed. Of course, if they were to lose one of those showdowns against SMU, they'd probably drop to the 3, if not the 4 seed lines. Now, on to the other side of the bracket, we've got Gonzaga at our number 1. On the other side, the number 2 overall seed. They've just been dominating teams in the West Coast Conference, and I don't expect that to change despite the hard schedule. Then a surging Wake Forest team out of the ACC. And number 9 seed, we've got Seton Hall. The number 5, we've got LSU, who's bounced back from that rough stretch a while back. And then at the 12 seed, we've got Notre Dame/BYU combo. Obviously, Notre Dame has been surging. They're only a game back of Duke in the ACC, and then BYU has also been reeling as of late. So these are 2 teams that are going in opposite directions right now. Would not be surprised to see these teams on different lines come Selection Sunday. Then we've got Illinois. We already talked about their tough loss against Purdue last night. And then we've got number 3, Texas Tech. This is one of the teams that probably could be in there for a 1 seed, one of the few that could still be in line for a 1 seed if they can take care of that really tough schedule down the stretch here in the Big 12. Watch out for Texas Tech. Moving on down, we've got number 6 seed Xavier, who is coming off a really tough loss against DePaul. They have a chance to rectify it at Seton Hall, but they honestly have a pretty tough stretch coming with 2 out of 3 against Yukon, including 1 on the road, and then 1 at Providence. But then their schedule winds down from there. But that is a really tough loss that they suffered to DePaul. Moving on down to San Francisco, they're barely squeaking on, holding on to the tournament as they played really close to Portland the first time. But if you get it back-to-back, you know that team's going to come and bite you the second time, and they lose quad 3 or 4, maybe even 5, honestly, if we have to start making up stuff, against Portland. And this is a really bad loss for San Francisco. They are almost out of the tournament with that loss. And then they've got a date at Santa Clara, who just beat St. Mary's. So very hard schedule right here, but that Santa Clara game could be a quad 1 opportunity. We'll see how the rankings shake up, but San Francisco really needs to take care of business down the stretch in a tough WCC this year. Number 7, we've got Murray State, who continues to take care of business. And then we've got TCU, who is coming off a win over Oklahoma State. Not the best win, but TCU is quite a lucky team. They squeak out a lot of wins. So they've got a tough one on the 12th at Texas Tech. And then obviously down the stretch of the season, they've got back-to-backs against Kansas, where either they can ruin their resume or solidify it. This Big 12 is obviously just a brutal conference. And speaking of Baylor, who TCU will play in just about 3 games, Baylor has been up and down recently, losing 2 of 3. That one obviously at Bama, and then they were able to win against West Virginia at home, but that one was pretty close too. And then they got the doors blown off by Kansas. They'll look to rebound at Kansas State, and then they've got 2 pivotal showdowns with the Texas teams to try and be the best in Texas. Moving on to the bottom of the bracket, we've got their number 4 overall seed, Auburn, after their loss to Arkansas. All this team needs to do is just take care of business down the stretch in the SEC, and they are looking fine. Arkansas, number 8, obviously would just beat Auburn, so this technically couldn't happen in real life if Arkansas and Auburn were to meet in the second round, but this is more about the seeding than the matchup rules here, so we'll just keep Arkansas at the 8th spot. I want to keep it more true to what the team's actual seeding is as we follow the S-curve here. And number 9, North Carolina, is a very interesting story. They do not have a quad 1 win. Clemson, going into the day last night, who they beat on the road, would have been a quad 1 opportunity, but then since North Carolina won, it knocked Clemson down to about 79 to 80 in the net rankings. So North Carolina is, check this out, 0-7 in quad 1 games. They do not have a quad 1 win, but they also don't have a quad 2, 3, 4 plus loss. So, the committee likes those marquee wins, but they also like the absence of a bad loss. So North Carolina seems to be a mainstay in the tournament here, and I think they'll be able to turn it around eventually, or maybe one of their marquee wins they have so far will turn into a magical quad 1, but the same could be said about the loss. Number 5, we've got Michigan State, who has been very solid recently, and then a Florida team that has just looked up and down. I just don't believe that Florida will make the tournament, but for now their resume does say that they are in the tournament. This team just isn't that good. They're squeaking out games against bad SEC teams. I think they'll be headed for maybe an early exit in the SEC tournament, and we'll see what happens there. Then we've got Tennessee again. Florida and Tennessee couldn't play in the second round, but for this sake, I want to keep the true seeding. Tennessee has been very solid. They obviously have that very marquee win over Arizona at the beginning of the season. Their last 2 have been wins, and then they've got a couple easier ones until their showdown with Kentucky that is looming large later in this SEC season. At the number 3 seed, we've got a very solid Wisconsin team out of the Big Ten, coming off a big win at Michigan State. That was a statement win for this team, who also has a win over Purdue and Houston. And moving on down, we've got Marquette, and then Miami, who's very solid out of a weak ACC. Number 7 seed, we've got St. Mary's, who I just mentioned, lost to Santa Clara. That's not a horrible loss, but St. Mary's really can't afford to have much else happen to them down the stretch of the season. They do have a couple marquee opportunities. 2 dates with the Gonzaga, a date with BYU, who we'll see later, and then a date with San Francisco, all at home. So we'll see what happens, but I like this schedule for St. Mary's down the stretch, and I think that they will be able to make the tournament, assuming that Santa Clara loss was just a blip on their schedule. Number 10 seed, we've got Boise State in the Mountain West. As I mentioned before, has been madness down the stretch here. They're coming off their loss at Wyoming, but bounced back, and their schedule pretty much opens up here. They do have 2 games against Colorado State down the stretch, but other than that, it should be smooth sailing for Boise State if they can hold on. And there will be a lot of these just at-large teams out of the West. Number 2 seed Kansas, you've seen enough out of them. Very up and down. The loss against Kentucky, the blowout win over Baylor, and then obviously their loss to Texas the other night. On the other side, we've got our 3rd overall seed, Arizona, who would play Long Beach State. Arizona's coming off the sweep of the LA schools, and then the win over Arizona State. So they look to keep it rolling as they have pretty much clinched that Pac-12 regular season title, as I don't believe any of the teams behind them are really all that good. Then we've got a rivalry matchup in Iowa against Iowa State in the 8 and 9 seed matchup. Moving down, we've got Texas, who just scored that great win. Iona continues to keep things moving, but they would be an automatic qualifier right now. Not sure if they are at the edge of the at-large spots. We'll see what happens if bid thieves come through in that tournament. Number 4 seed, we've got UCLA, who is coming off the brutal back-to-back losses against both Arizona schools. That is horrible for them, and they dropped to a 4 seed, but they did rebound with a win over Stanford, so that secures their spot on this line, and they have a big showdown with USC. Then we've got 13 seed Chattanooga, who retakes their conference lead. Duke, who just suffered a loss. I think that might take them out of contention for the number 1 seed, as they don't have another ranked opponent on their schedule. In fact, they're the only ACC ranked opponent. They would play the Vermont Catamounts. Moving down from there, we've got number 6 seed Yukon, who has been up and down as of late. They're coming off the 2 losses against Creighton and then at Villanova, but rebounded last night to down a good Marquette team at home. They have some notable tests on their schedule, including Xavier twice and Villanova in the next 2 weeks. Besides that, it evens out, but we'll see what UConn does in those critical games. UConn always dangerous at that 6 to 7 to 10 line, honestly. Then we've got Belmont at the 11 seed. Belmont is a team that is just starting to appear. I've been higher on them than most. They're not the best team in terms of their marquee wins, and as they mostly come over mid-majors, but their losses have really been just to good teams for the most part, minus the 1 to Morehead State. They've losses to LSU, Dayton, Murray State, and Ohio, and those are all teams that are on the edge of the tournament. So this is just a solid Belmont Bruins team, and the metrics do like them, so I have them at 11 seed right now. Number 7, USC. Came off a close game to Pacific, battled against Arizona though, so I think they're fully deserving of this top 7 seed spot they have here, and they'd play Colorado State. Remember when these 2 teams were some of the last undefeateds in the nation? Well, we're a long way from that. Colorado State has dropped to a 10 seed. As mentioned before, they will play Boise State twice, and they get their rematch and their revenge at Wyoming later in the season as well. And finally, we've got 2 seed Kentucky, definitely in a position to advance to the 1 line at some point, as their schedule is very difficult in the SEC. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe and comment your thoughts on the rankings below.